Yeah, so I think in many ways, it's kind of take inspiration from what's coming up, right? And so if it's growing together, it goes together, which is really great to kind of keep in mind. Right now, being that it's May, we're still into asparagus season. So a very simple kind of marinated or grilled in seasoned asparagus is fantastic because you don't have to really pack much to come with you, and you definitely aren't packing a lot to go out.
From the river to the valley to the sea. All the places, all the people that you can meet.
Welcome to the Mississippi Valley Traveler Podcast. I'm Dean Klinkenberg, and I've been exploring the deep history and rich culture of the people and places along America's greatest river, the Mississippi, since 2007. Join me as I go deep into the characters and places along the river and occasionally wander into other stories from the Midwest and other rivers. Read the episode show notes and get more information on the Mississippi at MississippiValleyTraveler.com. Let's get going. Welcome to episode 60 of the Mississippi Valley Traveler Podcast. Well, we're back after an unplanned break. Haven't been able to get a new episode out for a little bit for a combination of reasons that really come down to travel, poor planning, and some tech challenges. So at least two of the three I think I've taken care of. I'll leave you guessing as to which one is still an issue. Happy to be back, and I'm looking forward to rolling out some new content for you over the next few weeks. I've got several interviews planned and ideas for a couple of solo episodes about travel along the Great River Road. Those will be coming up, and hopefully there'll be a very exciting announcement I'll be able to make later in June. But in this episode, it's my pleasure to bring you the conversation I had with Josh Galliano. Josh is an acclaimed chef in the St. Louis area, but he grew up down in southern Louisiana near the Mississippi River. And he has done a number of trips with Big Muddy Adventures in St. Louis where he cooks on a sandbar. He seemed like the perfect person for me to have a conversation with about campfire cooking. So our conversation goes in a couple different directions. I was also just really curious about his path into the professional cooking of being a chef. So we talk about his background and how that all came about. We then get into the nuts and bolts of campfire cooking. And I think you'll find he's got a lot of very helpful tips that all of us can use. I'm looking forward to trying them, but all of us could use to bring some freshness, maybe try out some new things when we're cooking around the campfire. So we talk about the prep work and how he approaches that, some of the essential equipment, some ideas on some cold foods that are easy to make in advance, his thoughts on using seasonal or seasonally available produce and food products. And we also talk about the importance of cleanliness and leaving no trace when you're out there. We have a little sidebar where we geek a little bit on the idea of pawpaws. And then we finish up just by talking a little bit about his new project. He's working on a cookbook inspired by his personal experiences as a chef, but also his life living near rivers, particularly the Mississippi. So like I said, I think there's some good tips in there. I think you'll find some useful ideas on how to maybe change your game a little bit when it comes to campfire cooking. Quick little sidebar. I live in St. Louis. You may have heard we had a tornado that ripped its way through the central and northern part of the city. There are thousands of people that have lost their housing and may not be able to get back in, and there's a lot of need for assistance of various kinds. In the show notes, I'm going to post a link where you can find out how to help if you're so inclined, or you can just Google St. Louis tornado relief work, something of that kind, and you ought to be able to find something as well. So I hope you'll find a way to lend a helping hand to my neighbors. I live just a couple of miles away from where the worst of the damage occurred, and because of the way these storms can be so localized, we had no damage in our neighborhood, so we feel very lucky. But I know we need to reach out and do all we can to help out our neighbors. Thanks to those of you who show me some love through Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can join the Patreon community, and one of the benefits is you get these episodes early. There could be other benefits down the road. We'll see. Plus, you get to join this community, and it just makes me feel good knowing that you value this podcast and the work that I do about the Mississippi. If Patreon isn't your thing, then you can buy me a coffee. I drink plenty of that. I drink it every day, and I appreciate any help keeping that coffee habit going. If you want to know how to do either one of those, go to MississippiValleyTraveler.com/podcast, and there'll be instructions on how to join the Patreon community or how to buy me a coffee. And at that same address, MississippiValleyTraveler.com/podcast, you'll find the list of all 59 previous episodes of this podcast, along with the show notes for each one. I hope you'll check it out and maybe binge your way through that entire collection of episodes. For those of you astute listeners out there, you may notice a change in the audio quality about 2/3 of the way through. I just want to let you know that you are not hallucinating. We did have some difficulties getting this interview completed. We were actually recording this during the tornado and had to evacuate for a while to a safe area in the middle of our interview. And then I lost some of that audio and had to restart. And then we had to evacuate again, so we weren't able to finish the interview. So the last third or so of this interview we completed over Zoom. So thank you for your patience, Josh Galliano in particular, and thank you to the listeners for your patience with the varying audio quality in this interview. Well, let's get on with the interview. Josh Galliano grew up near New Orleans along the Mississippi River, where life is a little slower and you can appreciate the good times and, of course, the good food. He attended Louisiana State University, where he studied history and political science. Then his path shifted to Le Cordon Bleu, London, where he received the Grand Diplôme. He immersed in all things culinary during his studies in Europe, exploring green markets and eating at the temples of gastronomy. His adventures culminated by cooking at the Cannes Film Festival in 2003. During that time, he worked at two critically acclaimed restaurants that helped him reach culinary maturity, Angela Hartnett's Menu and Rousselon. Through countless experiences at some of the world's great restaurants, including Commander's Palace and Restaurant Daniel, Josh has honed his skills and palate. Josh later moved to Southern Illinois and quickly went native. With many amazing farms, producers, wineries, breweries, and restaurants, Josh found his voice through food. The phenomenal community and support of the St. Louis metro area has rewarded Josh with a loyal following and awards such as Food & Wine's People's Choice Best New Chef Midwest and multiple nominations for the James Beard Best Chef in the Midwest Award. Josh's cooking blends locality, technique, creativity, and reverence for the ingredients in the food he creates. For 8 years, Josh created breads and sweets for companion baking. Nowadays, he contributes his skills to community organizations, fundraisers, and events like Heartland Conservancy's Field to Fork. Sometimes you can even find him with Big Muddy Adventures cooking on a sandbar. He also moonlights as an author with articles published in local newspapers, recipes in national publications like Food & Wine, The Midwesterner, Feast Magazine, and with his current endeavor, a cookbook. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Look, it's been great to be invited here, but really been a big fan for a long time. So appreciate all the hours that you've helped me commute and all the podcasts I've been able to listen to.
Well, it's very generous. Thank you very much. And I'm grateful to have a chance to talk with you and learn more about your background and your connection to the river and how that affects your cooking as well. So let's kind of start with your path into the world of professional chefery. I don't know what the right word phrase there is, but you started off on a very different path where you didn't have a culinary career in mind when you began as a history major. What changed?
Well, like many people in college, I needed to make money. But also, I'd say like I was pretty kind of lost in a few ways. Like plenty of my friends had talents and they had just natural ability and skills and many different things. And I never felt like I had that. But after realizing I'm not a front of the house person and I don't need to wait tables, cooking felt like that natural place for me.
Cooking was not maybe a talent, but it's something that I honed and I got better at, and I knew I could do better than other people. So when I started off in Baton Rouge, cooking was at a bigger chain restaurant called Macaroni Grill, and that taught me a lot about speed. Taught me a lot about spec recipes and making sure everything was consistent. But what really was propelling for me as far as culinary was I had a great mentor on the culinary side, and I had some good mentors on the political science side that also loved food. So the things kind of combined together when I was in grad school, because the catering company allowed me to have flexible hours. I could do different food when I was available. It wasn't just, hey, dinner starts at 5, you need to be there. So I was really kind of lucky in that sense, and my mentor was really awesome as far as really showing me a lot more food than just standard stuff that was going on. She was worldly. She traveled a lot, loved going to other countries. Her cookbook collection was phenomenal, and we got to kind of pick and choose what we wanted to cook sometimes.
In a previous conversation, we talked a little bit about how you grew up in the river parishes and what your food experiences were like when you were growing up. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. The river parishes part that I grew up in, so it was called German Coast. Later on in the 80s and 90s, it was called Cancer Alley. And it was a great place to grow up because we were 20 minutes away from New Orleans. We were like 45 minutes away from Baton Rouge. But it was still rural. Like we still had the boundary of the Mississippi River on kind of our south side. We had different fields growing Creole tomatoes or satsumas on either side of where we were growing up. So it was definitely more rural, but maybe not like farmland rural. Still a lot of what everybody called sportsman's paradise. There was a lot of fishing. There was a lot of hunting, and we didn't necessarily do a lot of the hunting, but we did a lot of other stuff that we were able to kind of learn from our neighbors, like how to cook. So growing up, we had my mom's side of the family is from small town Mississippi, so we had a lot of good kind of traditional Southern food. And then my dad's side of the family was New Orleans Italian, so we had that kind of Creole Italian mix that isn't anything like other parts of like regional Italian cooking or even stuff that you see like in Boston, Little Italy. We were Sicilian immigrants, so it was a little bit different, very poor. And that poverty-driven nature meant that we were taking, my ancestors, not me, were taking a lot of jobs that nobody else wanted, agriculture jobs, selling vegetables, selling oysters door to door. I mean, these were kind of the things that were abundant in New Orleans during that time, but now not necessarily where everybody wants to do it. So they filled that gap.
So it's interesting you mentioned oysters. So would oysters have been at that time kind of considered like poor people's food, or you can contrast it today?
Well, it definitely was. I mean, when you kind of look towards some of the, I'm kind of a, I don't know, cookbook geek, and I do like looking at the history of things. Oysters were definitely kind of like a poor person food, and readily available. I mean, you look at some of the writings about the different markets around like New York City, and there was tons of big game markets, and there was all these kind of seafood markets, and oysters were just readily available. Like we did a great job almost wiping them out, in different areas. And so like with New Orleans, that industry was predominantly Croatian to begin with, and then and Yugoslavian. And then the Sicilians came in and kind of helped also, but they weren't the ones who were doing the harvesting. They were more the ones doing the selling. And there was a lot of Sicilians around, like the French market, farmers market that was down there. So they really were the ones who were kind of pushing it as a commodity, but they weren't the ones that were maybe doing the actual harvesting. When it came to the vegetables and different fruits, yeah, there was a lot of Italians out in the fields. I mean, in many cases, you'd see advertisements, especially in like the Delta area, for Italians to come in and be the replacement for the labor that was going up with the big migration going up towards Chicago. So, I mean, we were taking the jobs that nobody else wanted and making sure that the food that we cooked was still as tasty as possible, even no matter how poor we were.
So did you have any particular like family recipes that really stood out for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my Aunt Mary was the matriarch of the family recipes. She kept it all, and I mean, she was phenomenal. If we knew that she was cooking for a family event, we were going, no matter what. So like her stuffed artichokes were phenomenal. And I forgot the connection, but we had somehow we married into the Manali's hot tamale family at some point with a cousin. So she got that recipe, and so we had the hot tamale recipe that would wind up for different kind of events. Take your pick. We had great food all the time, but probably the one that we all look forward to because it was so time consuming and onerous was the stuffed artichokes, because she did it and nobody else wanted to put the time into it.
Good to have that person around. Uh, so at some point then, you decided you weren't going to stick in that career path, and you decided to go for a culinary career. What did it take for you to make that leap and get into Le Cordon Bleu in London?
The application process was actually pretty easy. During that time, we were talking like late '90s. We had the beginnings of the internet, so I could figure some things out. But the part that I wanted to really do was have a Michelin star experience as far as work experience, and I didn't want to repeat coursework that I already done at LSU. So I didn't want to go to Culinary Institute of America or Johnson and Wales because there was a possibility that I'd have to repeat classes for an associate's degree. But with Le Cordon Bleu, it was all culinary, so I liked how it was focused. It wasn't kind of this all-expansive degree. And then the other parts that worked out was that I found scholarships, and those scholarships I found because of the internet. And so I got a scholarship from International Association of Culinary Professionals and the James Beard Organization, and that took care of about a third of my tuition. There was still the whole part of like you have to live and find a place to live, and that's where going in as a student really worked out. So they stamp your visa to be able to legally work 20 hours a week when you go in as a student. And the first restaurant that I worked at, Roussillon, basically had apartments above the restaurant. So I got to live in one of the communal kind of flats that was above the restaurant, which was fantastic. It's probably where my coffee problem started off because I had instant access to the espresso machine. But it was a phenomenal experience, really was.
Is it possible to be a professional chef without going through one of those schools?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people like to call it the School of Hard Knocks. I know I do. But there's always that possibility. But I think it probably takes a lot more as far as from the individual and internally, that motivation to continue on and to find the right places to go. In many cases, you or I, if we were trying to start today, we'd have a lot more success because there's a lot more great restaurants. But, mid 90s or so, if you were in a town that didn't have a great restaurant, it would probably take you a lot harder amount of work as well as dedication to get past whatever you were doing every day for a job and learn more and more to where you could become a good chef.
All right. I'm always curious about that. So you got this great culinary training, and then somehow you ended up cooking on a sandbar with Big Muddy Adventures. So tell me how that came about.
Big Muddy Adventures. I first met Big Muddy Mike back in 2012. I was doing a dinner that Gerard Kraft helped to put together called Magnificent Missouri, and it was a 4-part dinner series. And I had the first part. It was indigenous foods, and so I was loving that idea. It kind of combined a lot of stuff for me, and it involved cooking at the Audubon Center, the Riverlands Bird Migration Center. So it was beautiful setting, beautiful idea as far as like how to shape the food, but I knew I couldn't be authentic, and I knew that it would have to be something approachable and be more of telling a story. So as I'm prepping and getting everything ready at the Audubon Center, here comes a guy in like this 3-piece red, yellow plaid suit, and he starts telling me about how he has this business where he, does canoe trips on the Mississippi River. And the whole time I was just like, you're crazy. You are nuts. Like my mom told me not to get on the river. And what do you do, And so he told me a little bit about it, but I didn't really think much more about it for a while until Mike's business partner, Rue, said, hey, we want to do these kind of like dinner series with chefs out on the river. Would you be interested? And so I think it was March 2016. We went out to Pelican Island, had a meal out there. I didn't know what to expect. Got home super late, but had a blast. It was just phenomenal. And the whole time, I'm sitting there like touching the water in the canoe, like I'm not supposed to be here. Luckily, whenever I do those kind of crazy things, my mom and wife don't really know how crazy it is until after the fact. But it's been a lot of fun, that's for sure.
So you really hadn't been out on the river very much until that time?
Well, a little bit. So where I grew up, it was a small town called Muntz, and so we're right by the Bonnie Carey Spillway. So in a way, we're always kind of encircled by it. And so when like the floods are coming in, and they open the locks. That's a great time to go crawfishing. And so we go crawfishing in the spot that's in between the river and the levee. And I always forget the name. It's got a French name. Basically, it's like derriere. The
Batcher.
Yeah, Batcher. And so we would go crawfishing down there when the river would flood. And so you got to picture like this Lord of the Flies kind of moment with a bunch of kids, one four-wheeler, and a bunch of crawfish nets, and a shotgun usually. And we would just go behind and set our nets and just keep going the length of the levee until we got to the spillway, and then come on back and do our nets all over again. We'd get about 50 pounds of crawfish or so from that, and then we'd have a boil. So we kind of dabbled a little bit in the river, but we knew not to mess around with the river. The spot where I grew up had a terrible ferry crash back in '76, and we didn't have like a permanent bridge, the Hale Boggs Bridge. I think, I want to say '81 maybe. It was a few years later, so we still had to take the ferry if we wanted to get to the other side of the parish. So it was definitely like we knew, don't mess with the river. It's dangerous. You know, there's always tons of traffic. You just don't go there. The undertow will take you. You know, any kind of tall tale or real tale was said to keep us out of the river.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's so different between the upper and lower parts of the Mississippi. There's such a different attitude and I think greater fear the further south you go, especially south of the Ohio River. Yeah, very interesting. All right, so one of the things that I was really interested in talking with you about, because you've had these great experiences cooking with Big Muddy Adventures, preparing these meals on sandbars, I thought it'd be fun just to kind of go through some of the practical tips you might be able to offer people who are campfire cooking. And I thought we'd just kind of start with some of the basics on this and kind of go through a whole bunch of practical tips for folks. And this might end up being mostly for me because I can use all the tips I can get for this. But let's just kind of start with the planning phase of this. When you're thinking, when you know you're going to be camping and cooking as part of that, what's your process? How do you approach sort of planning for the food you're going to prepare?
Well, I would say we can talk about some general tips, but I also kind of think it's a little fun to geek out a little bit on like the French Corridor Big Muddy trips that I've done, because it's kind of like three-dimensional chess, if you will, you know, like something out of Star Trek's, you know, a holodeck. And you're sitting there and saying, okay, with the French Corridor, we wanted to pay homage to like the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery. And then I wanted to throw on to it like more about our foraged items and our locally sourced items. And then the other part of it is sustenance. You have to make sure that people get fed. So maybe taking kind of from the last to the first, the sustenance part for me when I'm planning these trips is insurance policies. I need to make sure people get fed. I'm cooking for more than just me. I'm cooking for, you know, maybe 20 people or so. And when that's going on, I don't want to take chances. I hate the idea that I can't do a particular dish that I wanted to do or had planned to do. So it's not so much that I'm cooking everything ahead of time and I'm just reheating it, but I'm taking different steps to make sure that what I want to do can happen. So maybe as an example, Saturday morning, traditionally, when we do the French Corridor trip, I do pawpaw pancakes. Pawpaws are fantastic, but I'm generally not like processing the pawpaw on the beach. You know, I mean, it's such a fleeting time period that they're good and ripe that I have to go to we have a creek that runs on the south end of our property, and I pick them when I know they're ripe, which could be the week of, could be 2 weeks before. I don't know. So I have to make sure that they're ready when I need them. So I do all that kind of processing at home. But then to make the pancake part of it, I might measure out all my ingredients into a Ziploc bag to make the pancakes and then just mix in the dry stuff with the wet stuff on the beach. And then, of course, cook them when we're on the sandbar. You know, could you do it other ways? Absolutely. But at the same time, I also like to kind of tell a story and teach when I'm doing that. So not everybody's had experience with pawpaws. I usually tell them, like, look, this is a cool fruit. Most people don't know about it. We can't even really commercially harvest it yet. We're trying, but we're not there yet. So here, taste some. I want you to taste it in its pure form. And every now and then, if I have an abundance of pawpaws, I'll bring a few whole ones so that they can see this is weird looking and it's cool, and you have to do a little manipulation to make it work. But that's all a part of the story, and it's all a part of the experience, right? Like everything cooks really nicely over a wood fire, but it tastes better over a wood fire. I don't know why. So then, like, the next parts of it is, you know, we wanted to tell a story. And Big Muddy Mike said, I want to do it based off of Lewis and Clark. Can you do beaver tail? I'm like, no, I'm not doing beaver tail. One, I'm not even sure I can source it legally, but I'm not doing, like, we'll do something else. You know, so with that being said, I kind of chose different ideas. And once again, kind of like the Magnificent Missouri dinner where it was about indigenous people's foods, I wanted to honor that, so the Corps of Discovery also ate and killed a ton of game meat, and so I always try to have some venison. And I'm not a big hunter, but I help a lot of folks with butchering their deer, and they're very nice and let me keep some of it. So I usually have something like that as part of the planning. And they're going to keep the back straps, so I have to take the lesser nice cuts of meat. That takes longer to cook, so I do that kind of cooking ahead of time, but maybe finish it on the campfire with different toppings or different ingredients into it. So like one year it was tomato and pepper braised venison. So we had a ton of tomatoes from our garden. We had a lot of peppers from our garden. We braised all that down with the venison ahead of time. But then finishing it was I cooked some rice grits on the campfire, which doesn't take too long, but it was easy enough to do. And all you have to worry about is bringing water. So it really helps out to be able to do some cooking on the campfire, but then other cooking kind of done ahead of time. So you're not worried about too much stress of balancing it out.
So it sounds like part of that equation, too, is that there are some things that really take longer times to cook and maybe a little more effort to prepare where you don't have the space or the ideal conditions of a kitchen to process. So those things would be done in advance.
Exactly. And the other beautiful thing is now that we're getting into being outdoors and the season for being outdoors, it's actually great for not cooking. So a lot of times when we do kind of like the one night adventures, I'm not preparing a lot of like hot food. Like you've already been attacked by mosquitoes or you've already been paddling. It's warm outside. So I try to focus more on salads, cooling kind of foods. One of my favorites is always like a feta pepper and watermelon salad with kind of a Laotian cilantro sauce. Very much not typical river food, but at the same time, like it's really awesome when you're sitting there coming off the river and you just want a bite to eat. That's refreshing.
It probably is typical river food if you're along the Mekong, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the other fun thing is like, we try to tell stories about the food and we try to tell stories about like maybe where it came from or the inspiration. And there's a lot of connections, between like the river delta down where I grew up at and Mekong Delta. I mean, we've got a ton of Vietnamese immigrants into South Louisiana. And so that food definitely has influenced what I like to eat and what I like to cook. And so sometimes it shows up just kind of like what you're saying, like it's a good time of year for it. And all those ingredients are readily available in our area. So might as well just put it together.
So as you're sort of planning and getting these things together, so what are some of your tips and tricks for how to sort of properly store some of those foods, especially if you're going to be out on a trip for 2 or 3 days?
Yeah. So that's a great question because in so many ways, like it's probably the least thought about. And in my world, I tend to pack 2 coolers. So I label everything as far as what day it's going to be used, and I try to basically reverse pack so that the stuff that's going to be in there the longest is at the bottom, closer to the cold ice, and the stuff that's going to be used immediately is right on top. And then if I know that it's a 2 cooler kind of trip, 1 cooler's never opened until I need it. I don't want to have to sit there and just kind of keep opening. And I'm trying to make sure, like, for things that could possibly be cross-contamination, I don't have much of it. Kind of like what you were saying about some things that take longer to cook it ahead of time. Well, if it's cooked, that's less chance for a cross-contamination possibility. And if it's uncooked, then I'm making sure it's sealed in a way that I don't have a chance of it kind of leaking out or anything happening to where it's infecting and making a problem for other foods.
Do you have a preferred kind of cooler?
The ones that I can afford. So I have an Arctic and I have a Moose Jaw. And I'm sure I've got some igloos from, old times. But it goes hand in hand with like trying to make sure that everything stays cold. Make sure you get a good cooler that's rated to stay cold for a long time. I mean, we used to have a Coleman one. It kind of looked nice and everything, but it was not good enough for multi-day trips. The other thing that I do that maybe is a little outside of other people's abilities, cryovac your ice. It'll stay longer, especially if you have like a ice crusher as part of your refrigerator. Crushed ice will compact very well, and it maintains its frozen nature for longer if you have it under vacuum. So it's a trick that we've done in restaurants. It's a little harder with like a food saver at home, but since it's ice, it'll still do it. It's just not as maybe crushed and as compact as other parts.
Well, that's a great tip. Probably a lot of people have food compactors or something at home now, but you could just take a hammer or something and crush the ice that way into smaller bits. Are there certain kinds of foods that are more amenable for campfire cooking and certain foods you would never consider doing for campfire cooking?
So but personally, I don't want to have to boil water when I'm camping. I think it's a waste of fuel. I also think that it's one of those things you could do it at home where you can, make sure you have enough water, because water is so important when you're on a trip. We always bank for 1 gallon per person per day, and that's not for all the cooking. I don't want to take away their water. I want to make sure that they have water for drinking and we have water for proper cleaning, not the other stuff of cooking, So I stay away from dry pastas. I stay away from any kind of rice that needs more, dry rice that you have to cook. So that's my only really big rule of thumb. As far as things that are better cooking, maybe from raw fish. Fish is fantastic, and in so many ways, a little wasteful, but really fun. I like to do the cedar plank cooking of salmon over the fires, and the reason why it's wasteful is we leave no trace, and we leave no trace by burning the cedar planks afterwards. So it's not cost effective, but it's fun, and it's a great show for everybody. They see exactly where their fish is coming from and how we're cooking it. So those are some big ones that I really love. And we also are always worried about sustenance, and not so much like the sustenance like, can you make it through these 3 days, but sustenance in the sense of, I don't want you to be hungry while you're paddling for 3 hours and then we have to inadvertently stop so you can get a snack out of your bag. So because I worked at Companion, we had energy bites, and we had these really fantastic granola bars, which I'm sure the recipe's somewhere online from Josh Allen, definitely worth making. And so I would buy them from Companion and bring them along because they're fantastic little pass outs for each day. So as we are loading into the boats on Friday, I usually pass out granola bars and say, save it, eat it, you'll enjoy it. But that doesn't require refrigeration. It doesn't require me to really do a whole lot other than cut it ahead of time. So it's a great kind of little gimme. You get sustenance, you get great taste, and at the same time, you don't have to worry about anything else. No cutting boards, nothing.
That's a good idea. I like that. I know I've been on canoe trips where it's more commercially made granola bars or whatever that people keep in their dry bag under their feet or something, but having something homemade like that or freshly made, that would be preferable. Okay. So, equipment. What is the sort of mandatory kind of equipment you feel like you have to have with you to cook all right?
Some of the things that I always want to bring, grill grates, the little folding grill, is great for me because one, I need coffee in the morning, and so I can pop my little percolator on top of there. I'm going to set pans on top of that, or I can just grill directly on it. Especially sausages are great. I usually start off everybody with a homemade andouille on the first night, and you can just put them right on the grill. So, I don't have to worry about another pan at that point, which is really great. And then the second tool that I always kind of really rely on is fold-up tables, or the roll-up tables, really. And I know there's different manufacturers for those, but those are quintessential for me because I need a decent amount of space for kind of preparing and also serving the food. So I think the tables are maybe 2 by 3. I think so. Those are great. They roll up. They're very handy, easy to carry, not super heavy. So it's not like we're packing out a ton of weight. But those are the two main things that I generally always have when I'm on a camping cooking trip.
I think that's the part that I often forget about, when I'm going to be out. A lot of times I'm just car camping, but I've been on canoe camping trips too. But is making sure there's that little extra space to work with, to prep food on, to cut, dice things up a little bit. So that sounds like a really great solution to have something that's not heavy.
And I think there's so many options out there now. Like you can find one that fits for how you like to pack and how you like to camp. You don't have to get the bigger ones that we carry around because you're probably not cooking for 10 to 20 people either. We tend to always have some cast iron, but once again, that's heavy, and not everybody wants to carry that around. But I mean, there's some really great options out there, and seeing how we're in St. Louis, Griswold was a great company from around here. You can find some of their lighter cast iron, which should be at most flea markets.
Hey, Dean Klinkenberg here, interrupting myself. Just wanted to remind you that if you'd like to know more about the Mississippi River, check out my books. I write the Mississippi Valley Traveler guidebooks for people who want to get to know the Mississippi better. I also write the Frank Dodge Mystery Series that is set in places along the Mississippi. My newest book, The Wild Mississippi, goes deep into the world of Old Man River. Learn about the varied and complex ecosystem supported by the Mississippi, the plant and animal life that depends on them, and where you can go to experience it all. Find any of these wherever books are sold. So you mentioned fish.
Mm-hmm.
What's your idea about fish from the river? Pro, con, like if you're going to have catfish as part of a campfish cookout, are you going to buy catfish from a commercial farmer? You're going to try to catch it when you're out?
So one trip that we did on the river, I did bacon fat fried catfish, and I went for farm raised. And a few reasons for that: I can't catch enough around. I live near the Kaskaskia River. I would not be able to catch enough to feed 10 to 20 people. But the other part is like fish out of the river. I'm pretty okay with. I mean, it was always great growing up. You'd always see, we had the Times-Picayune as our major paper. And inevitably, once a year, there would be a picture of some kid who caught like this monster catfish, and he's hauling it back home like on his bike, and it's just like doing this miraculous, just balancing act. And it's fun. It's kind of cool. I mean, obviously, I would catch and eat the crawfish out of the river. We didn't do a whole lot of other Mississippi River fishing, but my grandparents had a fishing camp off of Old River, which was actually Recoursey Old River. It's part of the Oxbow, just in Point Capee Parish, a little north of Baton Rouge. And we did a lot of fishing there. So that was mainly for sac-a-lait, which everybody knows is crappie around here. Some bass, some perch, and gar. And we didn't keep the gar, but, you could catch a lot of gar out there.
A few years ago, we were on a sailboat trip in Central America off the Belize coast, and one of the dishes that they made for us was ceviche.
Mm-hmm.
Is that so? I've actually two questions. One, like ceviche seems like it could be a pretty good campfire, camping out kind of food, but you were going to have to do some prep in advance, probably. What would you think about catfish for that?
So, as a general rule of thumb, most people say no to freshwater fish as ceviche. And a lot of the reasons is because you don't know the water source that well. Kind of like the solution to pollution is dilution. Well, freshwater, you don't have a chance to dilute as much. But I would say that that's not quite true. A lot of the salmonoid fish, trout, steelhead trout, those are fine for ceviche and would work really well. If you wanted to actually have some freshwater fish for ceviche, you would need to do a little bit of pre-cooking to it and not just have the acid do the tightening of the muscle structure. So I would say something flakier. Catfish is kind of meaty, and you would have to kind of slice it and then cook it and then hope that it doesn't fall apart. But strangely enough, something in that carp, big flaky family would do okay. We do have some smaller sturgeon that would probably be all right, although I haven't tried it for ceviche. It's got a tight muscle structure. It would do well for cooking and then applying a citrus onto it.
Interesting. I love ceviche, but I was never sure like what kinds of fish would really be the ideal kinds of fish for that. Alton Brown had a recipe for catfish ceviche.
Really?
That he did on one of his shows. Yeah, I'll have to see if I can find it and send it to you and let you critique that. But
I would not critique Alton Brown. I grew up loving his show when it was Good Eats, and just always been a big fan. But I mean, that's one of the guys who really helped to kick us off. I think Food Network and the kind of love of culinary world, and he did it in a great, fun, directorial way. Did it in a super smart way. And he also showed some recipes that were like quintessential going to work every time he did them. Yeah, I would love to see that recipe.
Yeah, and I do remember that he was pretty insistent on farm-raised catfish for that recipe, so probably for the reasons that you described. So if the folks who are listening are interested in that, I'd just say Google on probably YouTube, Alton Brown catfish ceviche, and you can probably find a clip of that video. What about drinks?
Yeah, that's a really good one because just kind of like we were saying about like the food culture has really kind of progressed. So has our drink culture. And I like seeing everyone bring their own drinks. So you see this whole mix of people who are bringing, and so no glass on the water, right? So they're bringing in different cans from microbreweries or craft breweries all over the place. They're seeing different box wines. A lot of folks are putting some effort into, hey, what do I want to drink out there? But then you also see some folks bringing in kombucha, which is really cool. Really enjoyed that. So there's also this fun kind of sharing moment, like Amanda, who's one of the guides for Big Muddy. I would trade with her some beers. Like she'd say, I have this one from Louisiana. You want to switch? And sure enough, yeah, then you have a trade and you kind of get to learn something new. But as far as like making specialty drinks, I like the idea of a few different things, especially with the campfire kind of cooking going on. You can have a hot toddy very easily, especially as the night temperatures can dip on you. That's pretty good. And especially with like still 6:30 right here in our backyard, you've got some great resources for toddying up the hot toddy. But the other part that's really neat is we've got some pretty cool fruits around here and some pretty cool kind of ways that you can utilize different flavorings. So we've got sumac, we've got elderberry, which is fantastic. But a lot of those are not eat out of your hand. They're not just like grapes or anything. So you have to do some kind of manipulation to them, and you can turn them into shrubs. You can turn them into like these mixers that can be alcoholic or non-alcoholic. And so the elderberry part is pretty neat too, because you can use the flowers, which are June-ish or so coming up, and make a cordial ahead of time. And then the berries, you could also, let's see, that's end of August. They should be ripening up. You can take the berries and turn them into a syrup, which we do for serving with the pancakes. But then you can take that syrup and make it into a cocktail as well, which is pretty nice.
Oh, those are some great ideas. I think I actually have had pawpaw twice, maybe. It's a native fruit. We didn't really explain much about pawpaw. You want to just say real quickly a word of reverence for the pawpaw?
Well, kind of like what you were saying, like go online and YouTube. Usually the New York Times has a great article or two about pawpaws. This past year or two, there was ones about people growing pawpaws in New York City, or kayakers in D.C. along the Chesapeake Bay. Like they would pick them and eat them. Like with the Corps of Discovery in Lewis and Clark, they didn't know if pawpaws were an allergy or poisonous. They ate them, and then they had these breakouts. And only later did they figure out, like, these big burly guys were probably also hands deep in poison ivy, sweating so much. And so they were probably just eating with dirty hands covered in poison ivy that didn't break out because they were so calloused, but then rubbing their face and getting poison ivy in their eyes while they were eating pawpaws. Like it's got this weird kind of past that's really neat and kind of cool and esoteric. But it's unfortunately not a commodity fruit. Like Baker Creek Seeds and a few other folks are trying to make it to where it's commercially available, but it's not quite there. And it's a cool one. If you want to, there's a great book called The Pawpaw Handbook. It's phenomenal. Has a lot of great recipes in it. Tells you how to break it down and everything. But it's a tropical fruit. It's the largest fruit native to North America. It's also really interesting. Its flowers are this magenta color that's really neat. But they're not pollinated by like bees. They're pollinated by beetles. And then and flies. And the other part of it, they believe, and I could be really off on this, but all my NPR listening, I remember they said that it probably was the mammoths that were really helping to propagate and push the migration of the pawpaw, because the canopy for the pawpaw tree is either really low or really high. And the really low ones are deer fodder. But the really high ones, the older stands, were tall enough for where mammoths could actually get to the fruit and, of course, deposit it along their way. So, I mean, we've got this really interesting fruit that came about before fruits were really being fruits, and it's an ancient leftover thing that tastes good.
How would you describe the flavor?
So most people describe it as kind of a mix of tropical fruits, mainly bananas. It's like a custardy texture. So it's got a little banana. Depending on the ripeness, you get a little mango out of it. You might get a little passion fruit out of it. But it's in that tropical realm without having too much acidity.
So you mentioned the pawpaws as a nice seasonal ingredient to work with. There's a fairly small window of time when those are really available, but there are other ingredients that come available during the season as well. Do you have ideas for other kinds of ways to approach using seasonal ingredients or other like midsummer ingredients that you love using?
Yeah, so I think in many ways, it's kind of take inspiration from what's coming up, right? And so if it's growing together, it goes together, which is really great to kind of keep in mind. Right now, being that it's May, we're still into asparagus season. So a very simple kind of marinated or grilled and seasoned asparagus is fantastic because you don't have to really pack much to come with you, and you definitely aren't packing a lot to go out. And it could go very well with just a little bit of sliced bread, as you know, bring a nice loaf of an artisanal bread with you and kind of grill that almost to a bruschetta. You know, when I think later in the season, one of the things I like to do is we have a lot of peppers that come up. And so we'll do more like a Mediterranean kind of take on it with like a peppers, almost a sweet and sour agrodolce. And that goes really well as a dip almost with a whipped feta cheese or a whipped ricotta cheese. And so obviously we're not really whipping it on the sandbar or anything, but you know, if we pack it away already whipped at home, that makes it a little bit easier. And the agrodolce is very quick to come together because it's a quick saute with a little bit of sweetness, possibly from something that you have left over from breakfast, like a sorghum molasses or even a honey, and then a little bit of a sour component, which could be a part of a salad dressing or as simple as a vinegar that you bring just for that. So we really like to kind of focus on the things that take little to no cooking, but really pack a lot of flavor to it. And I know we mentioned that kind of watermelon salad, but there's plenty of other ones out there. As zucchini's coming up, you can think of it as like a shaved zucchini type salad with, you know, big flavors of lemon and herbs, you know, whatever you have coming up. Obviously, basil goes really well with it, but you can think kind of the Southeast Asian variety of flavors too, where it's mint, basil, cilantro, and it really just requires you to do a little cutting work. And that's stuff I love because I really like to minimize my time in front of the fire when I'm not just sitting back enjoying it, you know, sipping on coffee or talking and telling tales. The fire is great, but it's also middle of summer and hot as can be. So you don't want to sweat while you're doing all that too much, at least.
Right, right. You got to have that campfire conversation time, so you don't want to spend the whole time cooking, right?
Oh,
Um,
exactly.
so yeah, zucchini is an interesting one too because I know like zucchini on its own doesn't seem like it's got much flavor.
Mm.
Is it sort of like a blank palette in your mind? Like there, you find different ways to dress it up, like with the ingredients you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're growing zucchini, you're well aware that when it starts coming, it's coming and a lot at you. So you kind of have to either find that favorite recipe and just keep doing it all through zucchini season, or keep varying it up. And that the varying it up is where I like to play because it is kind of a blank palette and it's a texture, which is really cool. But at the same time, that blank palette could go in so many different directions. You could throw olives and big kind of citrus onto it. You can go more muted to where you have just really simple kind of the seasonal vegetables of the time, peppers and tomatoes and zucchini all together, and you let them kind of blend on their own. It's very much whatever you want to kind of make it, and it's just there to kind of get you a little bit more green vegetable sustenance and something that has some bite to it that does kind of soften up over time.
So that's something you could cook over the grill and then
Oh yeah,
toss with those herbs, or you could do that. I
absolutely.
guess that could be a cold prep, something you just do in advance
Mhm.
and have ready there, right? Either way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of, how we were talking about the asparagus, a vegetable that you can bring, grill it, it holds up, and you don't have to worry too much about like other preparations or overcooking it or not getting that exact medium steak temperature that your friend wants to have. Super versatile, and that's what's really awesome about it.
So for the protein or the mains, then like probably a lot of us default to hot dogs and hamburgers, and ain't nothing wrong with that. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of both of those myself. But if people are interested in maybe mixing it up a little bit, what are some tips for maybe getting outside of that routine?
A lot of times I kind of think back to what I've got three kids that are in scouts. So we kind of always shoot back to what we tell them to do and not do. So really, when it comes down to it, just make it to where it's something that's going to cook relatively quickly. You don't have to spend a lot of time tending the fire or making sure that it's fully cooked. So stay away from the things that are like braising or boiling, just so that you can spend more time enjoying your company or enjoying the setting. So the quick cook stuff, I mean, my kids really love foil packs. So that's always a big hit for us. And when it comes to proteins, seafood's very quick and efficient. I know it's not always on someone's radar, but cooks quickly, packs pretty easily, really compartmentalized into hopefully no cross contamination. Um, but it works so well. And when you're already by the water, it just seems to be a natural fit. So we mentioned kind of the cedar board or cedar plank on salmon, which is really great. Even flaking a fish into a saute really works well, so you don't have to worry about, that perfect sear for a perfect center of the plate fillet of whatever fish. You can kind of have it to where it's really just a component onto a saute or onto another dish. So in that case, a lot of times it's the last thing that might go into a pan of succotash. And the succotash could be not that kind of traditional fall type succotash, but something more like Three Sisters, where it's very fresh, vibrant peppers and corn, sweet corn, and something that really the fish just accentuates. So that's where my mind usually goes when I'm trying to break out of that norm. But like you said, this past weekend when we were camping, I got some good garlic and green onion sausage, but it was a quick cook because we were already kind of behind the eight ball when it came to setting up our tents. But it kind of goes really well because you're used to it, right?
Absolutely right. So what about foil packs, and like, what are some of the considerations to really make that work? And do you have a favorite sort of go-to recipe for that?
I'd say a lot of times we just call it foil pack hamburgers. So that's a favorite of one of my daughters. The other consideration is just trying to have it to where you're cutting the vegetables that go into the foil pack so that they roughly will cook at the same time. That's one of those things that maybe as a cook I think about more often. But it's definitely kind of that more Asian stir fry idea. Make the vegetables to where they all roughly will cook at the same time. And that might take a little trial and error, but you know what? I mean, everyone that's going to be around the campfire is pretty forgiving. They're not going to, send the food back to the chef and ask for a redo. But the vegetables around the same size, and then hopefully, your protein is not going to have to take a long time to cook. I mean, the beauty of the foil pack is that you do steam and kind of roast at the same point. But if you can kind of take your protein, maybe it's chicken breast, and fillet it a little bit thinner, that could help speed things up to the point where you're not overcooking your vegetables while you're waiting for your chicken to cook. And then the other tip I always have is just keep a probe thermometer, one of those instant read probe thermometers in your mess kit, so that you can quickly poke it and make sure that you did hit a good temperature. Because sometimes, those foil packs move off to the side and you don't realize it didn't get as much heat as another one.
Right, and sometimes the fire slows down in one spot versus another. You may not have noticed that the cooking temperature had dropped a lot. Yeah, those instant read thermometers are really
Oh,
indispensable.
yeah. And the technology's come so far and the prices dropped so much on the digital ones, it's even easier now. And kind of to your point, maybe on a side note, when we're camping on a sandbar, we're mainly dealing with driftwood, and driftwood burns super hot, super fast. So really paying attention to those temperatures and making sure that you're hitting good safety temperatures on your cooking, it's pretty important. And I mean, if you do it often enough, you can just go by your feel and your senses. But if it's kind of new to you, take the extra moment to be cautious and make sure things are cooked right.
Absolutely, yeah. So we haven't really talked at all about dessert options. One of my favorite sort of after dinner snacks in the summertime, especially coming up here in June, is just to get some fresh blueberries and maybe toss them with a little bit of lemon juice and honey. Uh,
Perfect. That's
do you
amazing.
have other quick and easy sort of ideas for that? Obviously, ice cream is probably not the best idea, but
So in some cases, what I try to do is kind of the same idea with the pawpaw pancakes, is that I have maybe a bag of prepared dry ingredients that I plan to mix together. So I really think in that realm of the American desserts of like grunts and slumps and buckles and cobblers, obviously. So in some cases, whenever the trip is happening, I really try to look to see what are the seasonal fruits around me. In some cases, it's fantastic because it's peaches, because you don't really have to do a whole lot to peaches. Kind of back to the idea of a real simple grilled peach with a syrup, or even a splash of a vinegar really goes well for an ending part of the meal. When it comes to some of the later fruits in the season, we grow muscadines, which is a native grape to America. And so there's the grape hull kind of pie realm, which is kind of akin to the cobblers and stuff. And we'll make a great pulse slump, which is really easy to do over a campfire. And as long as you've got a Dutch oven with a lid, you're pretty good. Now, on the sandbar with the kind of driftwood coals, it takes a little bit more work, just trying to make sure that the top gets cooked before the bottom gets burnt. But in a lot of cases, a good Dutch oven with one of the flatter lids works out great for that.
I'm getting hungry.
That's the problem with these kind of talks, is that we start having a good time talking about what we want to eat, and then all of a sudden it's like, is it lunch yet? And
Yeah,
who's cooking
it's
for me?
lunchtime somewhere. The other thing that I think we should probably talk about quickly too is just the idea of cleanup. And you mentioned leave no trace. Could
Mhm.
you just say a little bit about how you approach that cleanup and the way you pack out your trash?
So the one thing that I'm not too pleased with, but it's kind of a necessary evil, is I bring nitrile gloves with me when I'm preparing, because I'm usually going between 3 to 4 different dishes for one meal at a campsite. So for me, that's a problem, because I'm creating a lot of trash every time I switch between gloves. But it's the necessary evil, because I can't sit there and really wash my hands every time, or I'm using up a ton of water that's kind of maybe necessary but unnecessary. So when that happens, I'm usually keeping one Ziploc bag and just keep popping my gloves in there, so that I'm not creating a mess that gets blown away. When it comes to the rest of it, if there's usually never any extra food, and that's a big plus, and I love that. But if there is, we'll tend to burn it, basically. So we'll make sure that before we put out the campfire, we spread the coals a little bit and burn anything that might be extra, or let's say I screwed up and I accidentally scorched something that's going on to the fire. As far as the cleanup goes, I try to make it to where the cast iron is quickly and easily scraped out in a quick reboil of potable water before we pack it away. And that's just so that I don't ruin the seasoning on it, and I can use it fairly quickly for the next cook that I need to do. After that, we kind of treat it just like with any other camp out. We survey the area. We make sure we grab everything that we meant to grab, pack it away as compact as possible. So back to the idea of, I have 2 ice chests, one that I use for kind of each day. As I'm emptying out one ice chest, that ice chest is empty and now getting filled up with any trash that needs to be brought back that can't be, taken care of on the beach side, or it's coming back with a dirty dish that can't be taken care of on the campsite. So we're trying to minimize the expansion of trash space, but at the same time make sure that we're not leaving anything for someone else to have to deal with.
Right. So just to be clear too, like if you've got food scraps from the
Mhm.
meal or bones or something like that, what's your approach to handling those?
Most of the time, if that can't be burnt, we're going to bury it, so that it's not going to be an immediate kind of like a raccoon or something digging it up. Hopefully, we don't have to worry about that. Most of the time, when it comes to the really kind of more problematic stuff, if I think that it shouldn't be on a beach to where it could be dug up relatively soon, I'm going to bring it back with me. And honestly, I haven't really had a whole lot of those instances that I've had to worry about. But if I'm at all concerned about it impacting the surrounding nature, I'll just bring it back with me and deal with it back home.
Fantastic. I have a feeling we could have this discussion for hours on end, but we probably also have other things that need to happen in our lives. So I know you have a work in progress right now. Would you like to preview a little bit what you're currently working on?
Thanks. And I guess it's one of those kind of like moments of full disclosure. Thank you also for guiding me through some of this. So I'm trying to, well, I'm working on a cookbook, and the cookbook is basically an outgrowth of my realization that for whatever reason, I've lived around rivers my whole life. And those rivers have been a big impact on what it was like growing up, but also what it's been like for me personally and professionally. So it's definitely a memoir, kind of a souvenir type cookbook where I'm telling stories, but I'm also imparting a bunch of recipes that are either reflective of that area, that time in my life, or something that I've kind of taken as inspiration and worked on through the years. So in my sense, I grew up along the Mississippi River and lived along the Mississippi River at different parts of my life. I mean, obviously, we're kind of in that range again, but I've also lived around Cane River, Old River in Louisiana, the Thames. Now I'm kind of close to the Kaskaskia. So all these rivers have kind of had an impact on who I am and what I've done, and I kind of want to just honor that. And I think it's a good time in my life to be able to put that into words and kind of hopefully inspire some other people to get out there and enjoy the riverways.
That sounds fantastic. I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch of people interested in reading a book like that, especially if you dropping in a recipe here and there and helping us expand our the possibilities when we head to the kitchen or the campfire.
And I like how you said that too, because it's not just recipes for when you're out on the river camping or for the things that you get out of the rivers. It is hopefully going to be something that you can use on various parts of your life. And kind of to that point too, is like, we want to kind of really talk about the sustainability of our riverways and talk about the relatively heritage foods that come from them. So it's kind of, like I said, paying homage and kind of working with a lot of people that have different input. So, we work with the Big Muddy folks. We work with, I get a chance to work with Ingrec, and kind of taking their expertise of what they do and filtering it into the cookbook and hopefully the recipes and the stories as well.
All right. Well, that sounds great. So, if people are interested in kind of following your progress, I know you have been posting occasional updates about things that you're working on with this. If people want to follow your work and know and be informed when the book is ready to be released to the world, what's the best places for people to follow you?
Right now, Instagram would be best. So the handle's Josh Galliano, and the website's a work in progress right now. So I'll announce it on Instagram when the website is up and going, and hopefully all the little kinks and nuances are worked out.
Great. Josh, thanks so much for your time and for your patience during this interview.
Well, thank you for having me. Obviously, thanks for the guidance as well, because it takes a lot of patience both ways to make this one work.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the series on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss out on future episodes. I offer the podcast for free, but when you support the show with a few bucks through Patreon, you help keep the program going. Just go to patreon.com/Dean Klinkenberg. If you want to know more about the Mississippi River, check out my books. I write the Mississippi Valley Traveler guidebooks for people who want to get to know the Mississippi better. I also write the Frank Dodge Mystery Series that's set in places along the river. Find them wherever books are sold. The Mississippi Valley Traveler podcast is written and produced by me, Dean Klinkenberg. Original music by No Offense. See you next time.